What's going on, y'all? Welcome to 8 Cubes. I'm KM Best. Lambie Series is indisposed this week, so we are joined by his suggestion for guest host, Ordinary Harry. We're putting a lot of pressure on Ordinary Harry here because Lambie specifically was like, hey, I got Harry to do this. Let's get Harry on here to be my replacement for these weeks while I'm not going to be here. Big shoes to fill, Harry. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I'm not going to fill the shoes, though. I'm bringing my own shoes.
New shoes?
They're smaller.
What kind of shoes?
They're smaller size. And I'm just going to bring my own shoes and do my own thing because I know I can't replace Lambi. He's got his own way of thinking. I have my own way of thinking, but I'm super happy to be here and just talk snap with you. That's the most important part.
I'm super grateful that you're here, and let's start with Corvus Glaive, a 3/5 that says when you play this card, you discard 2 cards, and you get 1 extra energy the entire game. Now, typically, I think a lot of people look at this card, and I am one of those people, and I look at it and I say, I don't really understand where this guy goes. I don't want him in my ramp deck because I don't want to discard my cards, and I don't want him in my discard deck because I'm not really using that extra energy very well. One thing I've been kicking around lately, though, is what if we can just play him in Thanos and just be like, yeah, I'll discard 2 cards. I don't care. I have all the cards anyway. My hand is 7 cards. I'll discard 2 cards. I don't care. I will use this as my alternate time stone, alternate wave. That's the only thing I've been kicking around recently that actually makes me like at least some degree of excited about this guy, because I feel like in ramp, I don't get it. In discard, I don't get it. What if I'm just like, I don't know, it's a 3/5. I'll put it in Thanos. I'll throw away my cards. I'll live. It's the only thing I can think of that makes this card legitimately exciting. Where are you at with this guy, Harry?
That's exactly what we need. Another Thanos card.
Yeah.
Yay! But that makes sense. I didn't think about it. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I did not even think about putting this card in Thanos. I just thought that this card has potential once the card for next week is released. That's the only thing that would Proxima Midnight, like in conjunction with that card, if you combine them together, then you just increase the density of cards that you don't mind discarding from your hand. And then maybe some kind of, you know that deck that's not very good right now, but that deck with Silver Samurai that just discards X23 and all that stuff. Kind of a deck like that, where you take the extra energy and take advantage of it, like a bunch of extra energy, with cards that you don't mind getting rid of or getting out of your hand. Probably that's where I think it might land, but also with Proxima, maybe in a discard shell, which it is true that it doesn't really take a good advantage of the extra energy, but it could. Like, you could run like 2 of those good 3 energy discards, like Sif and the ninja guy. I forgot his name because I never used that card. 3/6. So you can play those 2 on turn 5, or you can play Colin Wing with a 3-cost discard on turn 4, or you can play a 4/8 if you have a bunch of cards that you don't mind discarding from your hand. Like, you can have X23, not X23, probably Wolverine, Proxima, Swarm, the Apocalypse. Like, you have a bunch of cards, because it is true that it's a very interesting ability. The +1 energy is very interesting to explore and allows you to, cheat out stuff earlier than you would. But at the same time, if we've learned anything from the past, is that a random discard is bad, very bad. Like, all the cards that have random discard, even though they have exceptional stats, like, they're ridiculously overstated. There's a 3/6 and a 4/8, and no one's using them. That's not random. It's because random discards, pun intended, random discards are just bad, right?
I will say, okay, in order. 1, I did want to put Corvus in that deck, right? I was like, okay, we put Corvus in that deck, and then we play like mid-range type stuff. But like, okay, if I'm going to play a mid-range type deck where I'm relying on discards to cheat my stuff out, and I, in that deck, am necessarily going to be relying on that as my points, and then I'll be playing like Shang-Chi and Enchantress. I feel like that random discard issue crops up very, 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 very heavily, where it's like, if my deck is Corvus Glaive, X23, Swarm, stuff like that, I'm going to need tech cards in there for the decks that go over the top. And if I'm playing Corvus Glaive and I discard my tech cards, I immediately proceed to Alt F4 and throw my laptop out the window. And so it's like I want it to make sense there, but I find it hard to figure out how he can go in that deck without ruining your life some of the time, and if his upside is worth the ruining your life some of the time, which is why I was just like, I don't know, what if we put him in Thanos? That deck always has like a full hand anyway. But even Thanos, it's like, we're a Devil Dinosaur deck, right? Like, we want those cards in hand. We're built for that. And it's like, I worry that this guy might not have a home despite being premium stats with a really interesting ability.
I think I agree with you 100%, but I think you just, because I did not even think about putting this card in Thanos. I love that idea though. I think you just make your Thanos not be a fucking, can I say that?
Yeah, you can say that. I don't care.
A freaking Devil Dino deck. Just change Devil Dino and put something else in there.
But it needs to be big, right? It's got to be like
a
put
5,
more
6
10
drops.
plus.
You're gonna have extra energy anyway.
Well, the whole point of I need like a 5/12 basically to replace Dino. It's like it's gotta be something that procs Scar. It's gotta be something that I can like ramp into that I feel good about. And it's like
ramp into, I don't know, Dog Walk and utilize your Shang-Chi to win the location. Ramp into there's stuff you can put 6 drops, especially like because you're gonna have extra energy. Like imagine this: like you open up, like you have your starting hand is Time Stone Corvus Glaive, and then you pop off. Turn 1 Time Stone, turn 2 Corvus Glaive, and you're 1 energy ahead the whole fucking game.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it, but now that you mention it, I'm liking the idea. I can see a different type of Thanos popping off with this card, but I don't see it doing anything else. I really don't see it doing anything else. It seems like even if in that deck where you have a bunch of cards that you don't mind discarding, like it's just going to be a fun deck that's not going to do much, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to affect the meta. You can't reliably run tech with this card because you're going to lose it. You're going to discard it. You can't reliably, like, how many points are you even going to put out? How are you going to compete with the current Hela deck that just pumps out a bunch of power and doesn't care about what you're doing? How are you going to compete with the decks that are in the meta right now? You're not. It's not going to be a meta card. It's going to be a fun card. But in Thanos, I can see, something. I can see something there. You go.
So next up is a defense of Hela. And I'm not going to be the one offering the offense here. I'm going to be the one offering the defense. Harry has a very strong opinion on Hela that mirrors what I thought last week, but my thinking on Hela has changed a little bit. However, Harry, Hela, you're not a fan. Please elaborate.
Okay. Well, I think you misunderstood our earlier conversation. I think Hela being in the meta is not good for the game, but I don't dislike the deck. Like, I don't think the deck is oppressive in any way. Okay. But it's not good for the game in the fact that it's a highly RNG based deck. It doesn't, like, it basically strips the game from a lot of the details that separate the good player from the best, right? But planning your turns ahead of time, making sure like you're playing out enough tempo according to what your opponent is, making like it's like a script that you follow. You do 1, 2, 3, and then Hela does her thing, and you win the game. You don't have a lot of room to express skill. It's more about volume of games, because on average it's a good deck and it's going to bring you more cubes than it's going to lose you at the end of the day, right? Because of the RNG, it does lose to itself. So basically what it boils down to is that I think that it makes the game, it strips a lot of the skill from the game, and it focuses more on what separates a good poker player from a bad poker player, in that it makes the game more like poker than a card game, in that you need to focus more on when to snap and when to retreat, when to bluff, even that you have the Hela in your hand on turn 6, even if you don't, and removes the essence of the game, which is, playing your cards in the correct location, in the correct order, deciding, if you want to, for example, skip a turn just so you can draw priority and you're not afraid of Shang-Chi, or, whatever, or play here so that you want to draw priority and you don't want to, like those things feel like they don't matter. It's just Hela deciding games on turn 6. And that's not good for the game overall. The deck is not bad, and I wouldn't want to be in Second Dinner's shoes right now because a lot of people are complaining about the deck, and they probably need to do something about it. But I also don't see how you balance something like Hela right now without completely gutting it.
Yeah, so I agree that it is a card or a deck that functions similar to Galactus, where it strips out a lot of what makes the game a card game and turns it more into a different kind of game. Where you could argue Galactus turned the game into like war, I would say, yeah, Hela turns the game into something more like poker, where it's just an issue of resource management, of cube management. My defense that I'm going to offer is I feel like I got significantly less angry at Hela once I realized that I did not have to be a calling station for the Hela gamer, right? Like once I realized that it's like, I can leave. Like this is only one cube. I'm good. And I just need to make it back when they fall apart the next time, right? Like when they're doing their thing and they've done their thing, it's like, okay, it actually does. You have to play poker right back. It does become a game of cube management, right? And I think that while that is frustrating, I do think that Hela, as compared to Galactus, is much more in line with what Snap was meant to be, so to speak, right? Because where Galactus took everything and stripped it down to, did you put it on the right spot, when Galactus was very good. Hela is genuinely an exercise in the core mechanic of Marvel Snap, and that is the snap. And I think that there is something to be said for a deck that stresses those skills as opposed to just pure card game skills, because Marvel Snap, it advertises itself as a card battler for a reason. It is not a competitive card game. It's a different kind of thing. And I think a lot of that comes down to the betting mechanic, and having a deck that overemphasizes the betting mechanic, like Hela. It might not be the favorite of people like you and me who came from a card game background and want our card games to be like card games, but I get why people like it. What I will also say, though, is that I do think that it does come close to being an issue in terms of what decks, in terms of like what kind of gameplay experience you want to have. It's the kind of thing where it's like, if it lasts too long, I think you can see someone getting tired of it. And in addition, I do think it's important to point out exactly why Hela is good right now, though. Like this is really key to understanding why people are so like vociferous in their defense of Hela. It's good because it beats Sarah, and everyone hates that too. Like when you look at it's Sarah. Sarah is a deck that goes, some would argue, too far into being a card game deck, where it's like all it is interacting with you. It is just interacting and interacting and interacting, and all the stuff you did, I'm blowing it up. It doesn't matter. I got rid of it. It's all gone, right? And Hela being a deck that is entirely on the opposite side of the spectrum, it's naturally going to appeal to people who don't like the Sarah deck, and the Sarah deck is naturally going to appeal to people who don't like the Hela deck. And the fact that Hela just absolutely stomps Sarah is, I think, a big part of understanding like why this matters. That said, I'm sympathetic to your argument, and I've made basically the same argument myself, but I'm trying to be a little more open-minded about why people like this deck, what skills it's actually emphasizing, and how I can get better at the game to sort of combat it. That said, yeah, if this is like 2 months of the meta, like if Hela is Loki, I'm probably pretty annoyed.
I mean, I agree with you. Like, I don't hate the deck by any means. The only reason I don't like the deck is because of my luck. Because I dropped like 150 SP today playing Hela because I just can't land the cards on the correct location to save my life. Right? I was playing a different Hela, but still, it was just horrible. I don't think I've tanked this much in a long time. But also, I just noticed that there's a Lambi series under my name.
Oh, I'll edit that out. Don't worry. What I do whenever I have a guest is I get like a really stupid PNG looking sticker and I just slap it over the Lambi series.
That's awesome.
That's what I did when I had Binks on. It's just like, bam, Binks plays. It's like, because I'm not a good enough editor to do it normally, so the only way for me to do it is to make it a joke.
That's funny. Yeah. The bottom line is that Hela is not a deck that I think people hate. I don't think people hate the deck itself, and I agree that it is fundamentally an answer to what Sarah was doing before, because Sarah gets completely destroyed by the Hela deck. They can't answer
Yep.
what Hela is doing on the board. It makes their Gladiator a terrible card and a huge liability. There's a Magneto in there that can randomly move their good 4-drops, because they ran a bunch of good 4-drops to the wrong location and lose them in the game. So yeah, Sarah loses to that, and that's a good thing. That it's an answer to that. But at the same time, it's just it's what you said. It's not good for the game long term. It's good for the game for a limited amount of time, for a month and a half. But after that, it just gets boring.
Let's talk about everyone's least favorite saber-toothed tiger, Zabu. And on this show, we've talked a lot recently about the imbalance between 4-drops and 3-drops and the role Zabu plays in it. And my conclusion has basically been that there is a fundamental imbalance between 4-drops and 3-drops. And originally I was thinking that fundamental imbalance is that's a huge problem and they have to rectify it. But then I started thinking a little bit more. Why did the original designers of Marvel Snap put Shang-Chi and Enchantress as 4-drops? What is it they were going for there? And I think what they were going for is that is the first cost at which you cannot play 2 of them in a turn. And I do think there's a very coherent argument that cards like Zabu, specifically breaking that rule, is what has enabled 4-drops to be as strong as they are. Because when you make a new 4-drop, it has to be competitive with the best of the best cards in the game. Shang-Chi, probably the best card in the game, is a 4/13 when you play it. It's no coincidence that most of the played 4-drops are 4 double digits, right? You play 4, you get double-digit stats out of them. And that is because they have to compete with Shang-Chi. And then what Zabu does is enable you to play 2 of them on the final turn and 1 of them on turn 3. And that is the real, oh man, this is the issue here. Because it's there is an imbalance between 3s and 4s. But is that necessarily a bad thing if Zabu isn't here exploiting that imbalance? And I don't know about that anymore. I've gone all the way from there is not Zabu's fault to maybe it actually is Zabu's fault. Because Zabu is the card that exploits the imbalance between 4s and 3s more than anything else. It's patient zero of this.
Exactly. I think the biggest, indicator that there's a problem here is if you look at what Glenn Jones said about 3-drops. He said that 3/4 doesn't cut it. The vanilla stats for 3-cost cards aren't enough right now for a 3-cost card to be playable. It needs to be a 3/5 or even more. Why is that? Because 3-cost cards are competing with cards that have a 6 power as vanilla stats. So in order to compete with a Zabu 4-cost, you need to be at least, at the very minimum, a 3/6, including your ability, right? So Zabu is, I think, you put it very correctly, patient zero. He is the cause and the root of the problem, and he's probably overstayed his welcome. I have a feeling that they are already looking into Zabu without knowing anything. But looking at what they did with Beast, I think that's the direction they want to go. And I have a feeling Zabu is going to go that way too very, very, very soon. Probably sooner. I don't know how soon, but probably soon we're going to see Zabu converted into an on-reveal and being able to be played or the effect being played just for 1 turn, which would make things a lot more interesting. Because right now, 3-cost cards basically unplayable. Let's be real. Besides 3-cost cards that, like Lady Sif, that enable archetypes, everything else feels extremely underwhelming. They just don't cut it. Why? They've been moving cards into 3-cost, so many cards for months and months and months, and then Surfer is still not a deck. They've been printing cards for Surfer. Surfer is still not a deck. Why? Because he can't put out enough points. He can't do what Zabu does. Because not only does Zabu put out enough points, but it enables literally the best tech cards in the game.
Yeah, I think that's the actual issue with Surfer, where like a Zabu deck has Shang-Chi and Enchantress. A Surfer deck has no answers to that because at 3, they're obviously just too dangerous to put there, right? Like you can't, if you put Shang-Chi at 3, like this is where I go back to the design thing, right? Shang-Chi cannot be a 3-cost card in the base game of Marvel Snap because that would let you play Shang-Chi and then something else, right? You can't do that.
And yet
here we are, where he is a 3-cost card in everything but the deck that keys off of 3-cost cards. And so like this is the like fascinating thing I think about the current state of Marvel Snap, because it's not necessarily bad. It's just this is an issue. And I will shout out, I saw a suggestion from Dara JN, which was make it so Zabu just reduces the first 4-cost you play. That takes away the double 4-cost turn 6, but still keeps him irrelevant.
That's a lot more extreme than what I said. But
no, sorry, per turn. First 4-cost you play per turn.
Per turn. Okay, that's good. That's really good. That's really good. That's why I said Zabu is a good card and a bad card at the same time for the game, because he's a good card because if you go into a website where you can check the meta and then filter by Zabu, you'll see that he enables a bunch of different decks, completely different. Whether it's Clog or Control or Lockdown or just classic Darkhawk decks, everything mostly off the back of 3 cards that are extremely powerful right now in Shang-Chi, as you mentioned, Ms. Marvel, and Iron Lad. These 3 cards are basically the backbone of every Zabu deck, and that's the issue I'm seeing. It's just making 3 costs irrelevant. It's just that it is what it is. Making 3 costs irrelevant. Like they just recently, not even 2 weeks ago, printed a 3/5 with an ability that seems extremely good, and it did nothing. It literally did nothing to the meta. No one's playing that card. People are barely using it just to do their missions on the weekend. And it's a 3/5, goddammit. It's like a 3/5 with a huge upside, and no one's using it.
We'll get to that one later. Next up is everyone's other least favorite green guy, Leech. And I have come to the conclusion that Leech is a card that is not fulfilling its role. Leech is supposed to be a card that is there to be a safety valve against metagames that are full of turn 6 explosions. And we were in last week this like enormous, Hela Sarah meta. It's the perfect time for Leech. And where is he? He's getting free rolled into Thanos decks. Like, well, what are we like? This guy is not doing his job. His job is to prevent that kind of stuff from happening, and he's not doing it. And it's because these decks that play Leech, in order to make the tempo sacrifice of playing Leech, you need to be very far ahead in order to actually justify that. And Second Dinner have spent the last, 4 months nerfing any early game card that actually matters that isn't just Zabu, right? So now, if you're playing a Zabu Darkhawk Leech deck and you don't draw Zabu, well, you can never afford to play Leech because you're going to be so far behind because you didn't draw your Zabu and play your 4-cost on turn 3. And so you're in these situations where, like, this is a card that is meant to deal with specifically what's happening right now. It should be good, it should be everywhere, and it's basically nowhere. And it's like, I feel like Leech has failed this city. Leech should be doing, like, the whole point of this card, the whole justification for this card that everyone kind of hates existing is that it deals with this. And it's this right now, and he's not dealing with it.
I just love everything you just said. I love everything you just said because it's like hearing myself talk about the card, but in a different way also. You used a different angle. I said the exact same thing, that it's not filling its role. It's not being used as a release valve to stop explosive turn 6. Instead, it's being used as a security to make sure that your big stuff, your explosive turn, is not your opponent is not able to counter your explosive turn 7 or turn 6 or whatever. Instead of being a release valve that stops what's going on in the meta right now, it's being misused as a protection card in that Darkhawk deck that was being used recently, even 2 weeks ago, I think. And then High Evo, She-Hulk, Infinite deck, just to make sure that your opponent can't stop your turn 7, or just to make sure that your opponent can't, blow up and empty their deck for your Hulk, or can't Enchantress your Hulk, or can't stop what you're doing on the board instead of what it is supposed to be doing. And that's the problem with Leech. Like, that's the biggest problem with Leech. I think he requires some kind of side grade. He shouldn't be where he is right now. Like, maybe the effects shouldn't be permanent, but give him more power in exchange so you don't lose that much tempo. I don't know.
What would you like? One turn Leech, you'd just play him on turn 5 if he had any reasonable stats. That would just be like really good, right?
It would be really good, but also it would be countered by Magic. If you play Magic on turn 5, maybe.
That is.
But then you can just remove Magic.
If you
want to remove Magic, then you're going to lose tempo also again. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not saying make him a 5/8 or something. I'm just saying maybe like a 5/4 or something like that. Not extreme stats, just a little bit more power for the. But yeah, he's definitely not fulfilling his role, and that's why I hate the card, because he's being misused. He's not being used for its intended purpose. And I really do think they need to look at the card, because fundamentally it's an unfun card. It's a card that just strips the game of any fun, basically, because you spend time, you spend money, you spend energy to acquire fun, interesting decks, and then you spend the same things to build an interesting deck, or just found it online and net decked it, but we don't talk about that. And then all the text for that Series 5 card that you spend so much time to acquire, or you spend so much money, or you've been saving up for months, suddenly it's gone, and it's just sitting in your hand, and it's like a 6-0 because you were trying to get that blob for the longest time. And it's just not fun, dude. It's just not fun.
Next up, Harry, I believe you are convinced that Black Swan would have been better as a 2/3 than a 3/5. I hold the opposite view. I will give you the right to strike first blood in this conflict. Why do you think it's better as a 2/3?
I think it's better as a 2/3 because it's fundamental. Because the deck you want to play it in the most is, classic bounce, especially after the change to Beast, where I believe that at least when I was trying to build a deck by myself, that a core or a key card in that deck is Bust. And then Black Swan, for example, at 3/5, having anti-synergy with Bust is just terrible. Like, it means you can't basically play here in the same deck with Bust. And you want to be playing Bust because Bust makes your Mysterio great. It makes your it makes so many different cards in that deck just work much, much better, right? And like, it's Bishop, it's Mysterio, it's the -3, whatever that is called. I forget names very often. Hood, yeah, the Hood. It's so many cards that benefit greatly from Bust. And then if you're playing the 3/5 in there, you're basically playing a 3/3, unless you want to include Luke Cage, and then you just completely messed up your bounce deck, because you don't want to be playing so many 3-drops that basically do nothing in your bounce deck, right? And because then you are going to be, if you're going to be playing Cage, and you're going to be looking for, I don't know, Valkyrie, and then you just lost the game. You're just building a different deck. So I think that's the problem. And also 2/3s. If history is anything to go by, like a 2/3 is, you can just play it in any freaking deck, and if it has an upside, then you will take advantage of it. If you get it, if you don't get it, then it's fine. It's still a 2/3. You can play it with Shang-Chi on turn 6, right? You can play Shang-Chi, and you can play a 2/3, and you're happy, right? But a 3/5 is just awkward.
So
right? A worst case scenario, like, you play here as a 2/3 on turn 6, right? Or you can weave her in on turn 5 with a 3 cost or whatever. And then on turn 6, you can have an explosive turn. But as a 3 cost, she's just awkward everywhere.
So my thought process, here's my counter argument why Black Swan is better as a 3/5. Because I do agree she's worse with Bast, and I think, that's fine. But I think there are very few 2/3s that you could not move to 3/5 and have them actually see that as a buff. Like, for example, when you look at like the 2/3s people are actually playing right now, Jeff or Armor or something like that. I think if either of those cards were 3/5, it would be unambiguously a stronger card. That would be just way, 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 way better. I think 3/5 Jeff, moving a 5 power dude around seems ridiculous to me. 3/5 Armor, so much further above rate than Cosmo. That actually strikes me. That actually seems like the kind of card they could print right now. I'm just throwing that out there. If they print 3/4 Kyera, I don't really see why they can't print a 3/5 Armor. But you see where I'm going with this, where it's just like, it is a number of stats that can actually impact and win a lane. And I think that 5, 6, 7 starts to get into that range. And when you are a card like Black Swan, and the deck building cost of Black Swan, it looks like nothing, but it's a 3/5 with all upside. There's no cost. It's all good. But the deck building cost is you have to run 1-drops, and 1-drops mostly suck. And so if you're running 1-drops, mostly things that have small bodies on them, you want your support cards for those 1-drops to make up that difference. And Black Swan, I think like the ideal stat line for a card like that is like, if you want her to be good, you make her like a 5/9. Like, you make her just like a 5/9, and then you're just like, okay, this is 5/9 Black Swan. She's going to enable me to play 15 stats for 0 energy on the final turn of the game. That's what this card does, right? Like, the bigger her number is, regardless of how much she costs, the bigger the number on the card, I think the better she ends up being, because of the deck building cost associated with her.
I agree with you that I think that a 4/7 is better than a 2/3. A 5/9 is better than a 2/3, but a 3/5 is not better than a 2/3.
Interesting.
Because 3s are shit.
Okay.
Because that's the main point. 3s are bad. They're awkward.
Right. So like
you have
isn't that an argument for it though? Like, if you're like, okay, 3s suck, so let's try to make a good 3. Isn't that what you do if you were a designer?
But it's not a good 3. It's just 3s are not good. 3s are not good. At the 3/5, I don't know. 3s are just awkward, dude. You can't weave them in. They take up your whole turn. Mm-hmm. You're forced to sometimes, not use excess energy. Play them on turn 4 or whatever. They just feel bad, dude. They just feel bad. I think she would have been so much better as a 2/3. And I think also that Hulkbuster is better as a 2/3 than he was as a 3/5.
I think that the Hulkbuster to 2/3 change is something like when they made Rock Slide go from 4/6 to 3/3, right? It was like, what we're doing here is we're cutting off the top of the high roll, but we're giving you like more consistency with it. So I think Hulkbuster is like basically a side grade, honestly. But I will say that I do still think Black Swan is an upgrade at 3/5, or at least I think that it indicates that they're thinking about the right things when they design a card like this. Because I think you probably can't make this a 4/7, right? If you make this a 4/7, people just play it in Zabu, and it's like really, really, really annoying. And if you make it like a 5/9, it ends up being like, oh, that's Sarah, but better. So you end up in this situation where like there's only really one stat line you can give it, and it has to be like 3 as big as possible, right? If you're gonna do this would it had to be.
I think that card being more flexible by costing less is more important than having more stats. That's my opinion. Like, being more flexible, because a 2 cost is so. Remember Mobius as a 2/3? He was everywhere because there was basically no downside in putting him in your deck. He was like a Jeff that stops 70% of the decks in the game.
He was pretty good.
Yeah, he was annoyingly good. It's the same thing. Like, as a 2 cost, as a 3 cost, she becomes awkward. You can't just weave her in on turn 4 or turn 5 and then get the benefit on turn 6. You have to basically dedicate a whole turn. Like, how many times have I had to play Black Swan on turn 4? Too many times. And skip one energy too many times. Or just play the 1-drop and then I don't have another 1-drop for turn 5 and she's useless, right? Way too many times, dude. Way too many times. I've played with the card a lot. She's just super awkward. It doesn't matter if she's a 3-5 or even a 3-6, probably she won't be playable. It's just that the 3 cost is awkward. The 3 cost is awkward. It just doesn't offer it just doesn't offer enough. You can't play her with other cards most of the time. She takes up your turn. Anyway, I've said the same thing 50 times. That's what I mean.
Let's talk about patch issues. In the most recent patch, we had some inadvertent text updates. We had the rogue issue with the power couples thing where she overwrites her own text, so she doesn't give up.
That?
They did fix the text. I don't know if they fixed the rogue thing. I think they fixed the rogue thing, but the point.
Did you know the power couples text is really it works opposite of what I thought it would.
How do you mean?
I thought, that.
Oh, you mean where it's located? Like it's located on the card, the card you haven't played, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's opposite that one you would think it works. Like so Iron Lad, if an Iron Lad hits a power couple, it buffs himself but doesn't buff the other card. Where if you read the card, you would think it does the opposite.
No, I get it now. Yeah, it buffs himself but doesn't buff the other card because the power couple ability lives on the card that it's on, right?
Yes.
The card looks for the other card rather than being like an on reveal that triggers onto it, right? Yeah. No, it makes sense. I get what you're saying.
It's opposite that what you would intuitively think it does. And I had that happen in the game. I played an Iron Lad and then I played. I don't even remember what it was. I played the other card. It was what was it? Iron Lad copied Star-Lord, and then I played Gamora, and then Iron Lad got buffed, and Gamora didn't get buffed. And I'm like, what?
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that actually makes sense. But what we were trying to get at, and this is killing me because like you suggested this topic, and then you also derailed this topic.
I derailed it because it was a patch. That text came in a patch, and it was working weirdly.
But that makes sense to me. That's not a patch issue. That's a correct implementation. It's just weird.
Didn't they say that Iron Lad doesn't get buffed because he isn't the other card? That's what they said when they released the patch.
Did they actually?
That's what I remember.
Oh man, that is weird. Because like the way it works being different from things like Thor or Thanos with Power Stone makes sense to me because of where the ability for power couples lives. Because
it makes sense now.
Makes sense.
It didn't make sense when I first read it. Anyway, patch is they're having a lot of issues with patches lately, right? Every time there's a patch, there's a new issue. Every time, basically that. Every time they introduce a new patch, something goes wrong, and it feels like something went wrong around Christmas when they weren't doing a lot of patches. I think. Like after that, it feels like the intensity of errors in every patch has increased, and it's ridiculous errors. Like the past 2 times they patched, they introduced text that wasn't meant to be there. Like I don't even know how that happens, to be honest. And how we ended up here, maybe because they are, as you said before, they're releasing an extra card, and that is putting a lot more stress on their production line. I don't know.
I do think it has to be something along those lines, right? Like when you look at when balance started getting really bad around like September, October, November, right? They're ramping up to do this thing where they release an extra card every month. That ended up starting in January, but I believe it was data mined to actually start in December. And so when you look at that timeline, you end up in a situation where you look at that and you start to wonder if they're just sort of putting an extra strain on design resources in that context, where the people that would normally be focusing on X, Y, and Z are instead like, okay, well, now we need to, design a whole new card from the ground up. And that seems like I'll be honest with you, that seems like a lot more work than taking the idea and doing like the balance stuff with it. That balance stuff makes perfect sense. I could probably do that, but I could not in a billion years go be like, all right, we need a thematic card for Kyera, because I would be like, who's Kyera, right? Like, I could not do that in a million years. So, like, creating an extra card every month seems like more than just like a 20% increase in the work you have to do. It's like a significantly more than that. It's like, oh man, you have to like go do a whole ass other full project every time. And so I do sort of wonder if these incidents are sort of symptomatic of that, where it's just like they were asked to carry a little bit more water and they're still getting used to the weight. If that makes sense. I think in terms of card design, actually, I think they've been knocking it out of the park. Like, we haven't had any like bad
100%. Like
moments,
they're releasing very interesting cards.
Yeah, I think they're doing really good at that. All right.
Sorry, whether they're broken or overpowered or whatever, at least they're interesting.
Yeah, like whoever's doing the design on, whoever's doing like principal design on these cards is really coming up with good ideas. Like, these are all really interesting, compelling designs consistently. Whether or not they end up good, people were like obsessed with Supergiant, right? People were like, oh my god, this is weird and cool and I want to try it, right? And like Cull Obsidian comes out and everyone's like, this is a letdown because it's boring, but it's really good. And so like being able to ride that line of like, even when the cards aren't amazing, they're interesting is like, that's really clever. I feel like they did really good.
I feel like January was a month that was a model month for releases. Like, cards were interesting, fun. They weren't meta breaking. I don't even know if any, like Kyera
really good.
ended up settling in the meta very nicely. But other than that, the other cards were a lot of fun. Besides Hercules, obviously, but everything else were super fun. And even what's his name? I don't know why Beta Ray Bill just died out. I guess Beta Ray Bill died out because people expected him to die out because of Supergiant, but then Supergiant was too good for your own good. Anyway, we derailed the situation. Bottom line is the discussion again. Bottom line is that even though it's funny, and it's been funny for some time, that every time they release a patch, it's got a bunch of issues, and then new text shows up, and everyone's just laughing and having a good time with it. I think people are starting to lose patience with the game, like, basically being weird every time there's a patch, because it doesn't break. Like, we keep playing. There's not any fundamental issues with, the game breaking down. Like, I've seen other games where they release a patch and then you can't play the game for a day or two. That doesn't happen, which is really good, and I hope it never happens. But at the same time, it's going to stop being funny very soon when, like, they released Black Swan. She was at 2, 3, 4 hours. Then they released a patch. She was like, every time there's something happens, dude, and it's going to stop being funny very, very soon. And I think they need to, start doing something about it sooner rather than later. And then there's also the issue of releasing a patch, breaking something, and then taking the longest time to fix it. Like the favorited cards in your collection that was, getting removed, and it stayed there for 3.5 months. That's not acceptable.
Or like when there was just a red dot on your battle pass every single time.
There's a red dot in my collection because I have the Dan Hip album with the Cosmo, yeah. And then it keeps thinking that I haven't claimed it, and there's a red dot there. Like, every time there's a new patch, there's a new red dot somewhere, and that's the most annoying part of everything. Like,
red
every
dot
time there's a new patch.
Eventually, the entire client is just gonna be dots. Speaking of proliferation, I have a proposal for second dinner. You're gonna have to hear me out on this, but I want you to stop making green cards, okay? I want you to stop making green cards. You're gonna hear me out. This is gonna be a bit of a stretch, but let's start with the basics, right? Loki, Hela, Leech, Leader. All cards people hate to play against. But here's my next takeaway. I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna invert it, okay? You stop making green cards. Go on a color wheel. Look at the color wheel, right? You go on a color wheel. What's right across from green? Purple. You know what's purple? Galactus, Eliath. Stop doing that too, all right? Stop making these cards. I need it to end. If the next time you come up with a green card or an inverted green card, which is how I'm going to refer to purple to make this argument work better, don't do it. Just make it a different color. It will make the card less broken. I promise. I promise this will work. This is my plea. I have cracked the code. I am in the Matrix, which, by the way, is also green. Do not do this anymore. It's gotta end. It's gotta end.
Yeah, green cards are a problem. Also, purple cards are a problem.
Yeah.
I think they're not so much as a problem as they're annoying to play against. Except Loki. I hate Loki. I hate Loki with the burning passion of a million suns, dude. Like I hate that card so much. It feels like it's royalty in this game. It feels like we're gonna nerf Loki finally after 3.5 months. Let's just change the way the whole game freaking works so that he doesn't lose his discount with what's his name? The one cost card. Yeah, so he doesn't lose his discount with Quinja. Let's just change the way the whole game works. So I don't know. I feel like
interesting note. You said he was treated like royalty. Do you know what the traditional color of royalty is?
Green.
It's purple. It's purple. Oh. It's it's purple. And then speaking of purple, it's been 1 year to the day as we record this since
Ordinary. You want to show the trophy
again?
Yeah,
show the trophy. This is the whole point of this segment, is so you can be like, look at the trophy, look at the day. Look at that. He's out of screen. There it is. There it is. Okay.
I found it.
Yeah. We are. That is from the first Creator Clash, which Ordinary Harry won with a Thanos Spectrum list, which, that was Thanos' big coming out party, basically, where everyone was like, "Oh man, this is such a huge problem." I remember once, I want to say once Dara got eliminated, I just looked at the deck list and I was like, all right, who brought Thanos? And it was like, they're going to win. And then you won. It was like, nice. Okay, we did it.
I actually beat Dara with that deck that day. I actually got into his head that day. I remember that. Because he was looking at the list and he was like, oh my God, this list has answers for everything. What am I supposed to do here? He told me later. And then they buffed Thanos a day after. Remember that?
I just think it's cool because, right now we have Lambie Series, who won Creator Clash 2, the typical host of this show, right? And then we have Ordinary Harry, who won Creator Clash 1, who Lambie's like, you gotta fill in here, which makes me the only loser on this show. I'm the only person on the show who's never won a Creator Clash. It's crazy.
But there's only been 2.
And I haven't won one.
Well, you didn't participate in either.
That is irrelevant to the fact that I have not won one.
If you want to win, you have to play first.
True.
And talking about Thanos, the thing is, I think that those games in the tournament, basically what they did is that they showed the community how to play Thanos more than anything. Everyone realized, oh, I have the green stone in my hand. I should snap turn 1. People weren't doing that. Yeah. Or most people weren't doing that. People were doing that at the higher level but high level of Marvel Snap didn't exist as we know it now back then. It was because there was no ladder. There was no ladder system yet. So a lot of people realized what the lines are basically. Oh, I do this, then I can move my lockjaw and move it to a different lane and do the same thing over and over and get a bunch of stuff out again. Those things weren't widely known. People knew about them, very specific people knew about them. And then you guys, I think it was you, Lambie, and your Discords, took that idea and then refined it to an extreme amount where it was the perfect 12 cards and then the nightmare began.
I will say, the people who deserve credit for Thanos, in my opinion, are... I'm trying to remember their names. Elite Exhasa and the Human Spider, I would say primarily.
Oh, they're still playing.
Yes, but by the time you brought that list, I feel like the list that those guys had was actually ahead of it. By the time that tournament happened, because you guys had to register deck lists how far in advance? It was a few days, right? You had to be a few days to a week in advance was the register and deck list, right?
Yeah, it was a couple of days.
It was a few days. And so, by the time the tournament happened, I was able to look at that and be like, okay, I'm pretty sure what people are playing right now is better than the list he registered, but he's also one of 2 people who was actually on Thanos in that tournament, right? So, you were so far ahead of the metagame that the only people who were ahead of you were literally the people who popularized the deck. Who were, the guys in the trenches making that stuff happen.
Fun fact, I beat that deck on round 1.
Yeah.
It wasn't shown. It wasn't shown. It was kind of lucky because that's what Marvel Snap is.
Yeah.
I still remember. Like I think they snapped me game 1, and then I played Reality Stone on turn 4 when I was ahead, and it swapped the location to TVA, and I won 4 cubes.
Yeah, but you know what they say. Reality is often disappointing.
Oh, it was for them. It was for them. Trust me. And then after that, the rest is history. Like that was the only deck I was really afraid of because I knew I couldn't beat that deck normally. If they high roll and I high roll, I can't beat them because they go way taller than me. And then yeah. But that was the beginning of Thanos, and I will never forget. People often ask me, what was the worst meta in the game? And my answer is always, and always will be, the original Thanos deck. Because, not mine, the one you guys popularized. Because I remember, to this day, and I will always remember, that I queued into the same exact 12 cards on ladder 15 times in a row. I will never forget that. And that has never
that's
happened
also
before.
your fault, though. Like, you're talking about, like, we popularized the deck. And you're also out here saying, oh, well, yeah, I feel like that tournament taught everyone how to play Thanos. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. Maybe you shouldn't have done that.
If I didn't do that, someone else would.
Man. Like, it's definitely not just like Spider and Hasa who were doing this. Like the fact, I think you're right. I hadn't actually thought about that, but I think you're right. Like seeing that happen in real time is actually indicative. Because like Thanos is to this day one of the few decks where the overwhelming majority of people feel confident turn 1 snapping something. And like that is something that is unique to it. And part of it is that's how it plays, but I think also part of it is that's how it was debuted. And I think you might be responsible for that, actually. I think that is legitimately, you could argue that is on you.
Yeah, I think I that's the one thing I'll take credit for. Like I taught people how to turn 1 snap the Yellowstone. That's the one thing I'll take responsibility for. But I love Thanos. I love Thanos in a way that he is inevitable. Like he truly is inevitable in this game. He's so on brand, it's unbelievable. He keeps getting nerfed. Not only him. Like I think Thanos is probably undoubtedly the most nerfed card in the game. He's been nerfed, whether it's directly or indirectly.
No, Kitty Pryde, come on.
Well, Kitty Pryde has been changed, not necessarily nerfed, but yeah, she's been changed a bunch of times. She's been nerfed how many times? 3 times?
4, I think. 3?
4?
Okay, hold on. Well, we can actually go through this. All right, so with Thanos, there's been 3 stones nerfed on him, right? Plus he lost a point of power, right?
Yeah.
Plus Lockjaw. Yeah, I guess.
Plus Quinjet.
Plus Quinjet.
Plus.
So 6.
Plus Leech.
Leech. Okay, 6, right? So then you go to Kitty, who released Broken and was changed to like 1/1+2 or something like that. Or no, she was
if you do the same thing,
she was a 1/2. Right. She went to a 1/0. Then she went to 1/0+1. Now she's 1/1+1. So 4 on her alone. Elsa, Angela.
Elsa.
Yeah. I feel like this is pretty close. Like,
it's very close. It's very close. It's very close.
These are like consistently the issues.
I also think that they overdid it. Since you brought it up, they overdid it with Kitty Pryde. I think at least Angela did. Like, come on.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I'm absolutely like I loved Kitty Pryde. One of my favorite cards they've ever printed. I love taking game actions. I'm super into it. And getting Angela nuked is her greatest crime. that is really, really bad.
Angela was just a stat stick that got countered, right? With Shadow King. So many ways to counter Angela. And now she just doesn't exist. I think they need to revisit those things.
She's like the opposite of a stat stick. She's like a no stat stick.
Yeah, she's
like a 2/5 sucks.
Doesn't do anything.
Yep.
It's so sad. That can get Shadow Kinged. Anyway, it is
all
what
right.
it is.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been Cam Best. Ordinary Harry, where can they find you?
Basically at Ordinary Harry everywhere. That's the handle I use on all, not all socials, but everywhere, like YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all those stuff. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I love talking Marvel Snap, and I don't usually get to, have a chat with other people on stream. I just talk to myself, and honestly, getting a glimpse into the way that you think, into your mind, and being a great Marvel Snap player that you are, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm very happy that Lambi suggested I come here. I hope you had a good time too, because I had a blast.
I had an absolute blast. I'm kind of interested to see how this episode goes over, because typically our episodes are like, 30 to 40 minutes. This one's like a solid 55. So I'm really interested
I just
to
love
see
talking Snap.
No, it's like this is normal for my guests. Like, this is what happens, because like Lambi and I, we're in a rhythm. We know what the show is. We do all this, right? But like when I had Binks on, it was like 45 minutes. Like, this is like a typical thing. I've learned to accept it. It just is what it is. I'm just interested to know, because like I think we had a really awesome conversation. I think this was super dope. And so what I want to know is, audience, if you're still watching, what is your preference for length of video? Although I realize asking someone who has finished a 55-minute video what their preference for length of video is will sort of necessarily bias the data. But I'm still going to ask, because I want only positive feedback. If you didn't like it, don't tell me. All right. Thank you so much. Remember, subscribe, like, all those things. 8 Cubes will return. We will have guest host Ordinary Harry back next week. And of course, Lambi will be back the week after that, once he is done with what is currently keeping him indisposed. Thank you so much for watching. As always, for Ordinary Harry, I've been Cam Best. Thanks.